it's time that everyone realizes that, healthcare, medicine, it doesn't necessarily think about your family. I mean, you want to find a doctor that hopefully you can partner with. If you don't feel comfortable with your practitioner, you're in charge, you can find someone that does. So you really, make sure you interview doctors. If you're finding a new one, make sure you find one that you trust and respect and can have conversations with. But at the end of the day, it is up to us.
Welcome back to another episode of the Peak Performance Life podcast. Today, I am very interested, very excited about talking about a very interesting topic. We have with us an expert. His name is Dr. Joel Warsh. He has written a book recently called Between a Shot and a Hard Place, Tackling Difficult Vaccine Questions with Balance, Data, and Clarity. This is a very hot topic right now. There is so much to discuss. And he has a great Instagram page as well, Dr. Joel Gator on Instagram. He has a huge following on there. Check him out there as well. So that's a very popular Instagram page that he's running. He's a board-certified pediatrician in Los Angeles who specializes in parenting, wellness, and integrative medicine. He grew up in Toronto and completed degrees in kinesiology, psychology, epidemiology, and community health before earning his medical degree from Thomas Jefferson Medical College. He completed his pediatric medicine training at Children's Hospital of Los Angeles and worked in private practice in Beverly Hills before founding his current practice, Integrative Pediatrics and Medicine in Studio City in 2018. Dr. Gator has also published research in several peer-reviewed journals on topics including childhood injuries, obesity, and physical activity. Thank you so much for joining us here today, Dr. Joel Gator.
Thanks for having me on, and thanks for chatting about all the crazy conversations like vaccines. It's a hot topic.
Yes. And we like to have these conversations here. I don't like to shy away from things just because they might get us suppressed or banned in the search engines. We want to share. The good thing is we have a great community. We email these podcasts out to our community, and everyone who wants to listen and learn can do so. And I think this is a very important topic to be discussing. So yeah, let's start with just a little bit of a background of how did you kind of get into what you're doing today in the more integrative, holistic health kind of work that you do?
I just got frustrated with the regular medical system. I mean, I'm not against Western medicine at all. I always say that. I always start by saying it. There are a lot of great things that we have that are miracles and that are fantastic. And modern medicine has some great tools and medications can save your life. But we're so quick to use a medication these days, and our health is just taking a nosedive. I mean, we're looking at kids, and I take care of kids, and the chronic disease rate is astounding. When you look at it, it's like 25 to 50% of kids, depending on what study you look at, have a chronic disease. And it was like 5% just a few decades ago. Autism rates are skyrocketing. It was like 1 in 10,000. Then it was 1 in 150 in 2000. Now it's 1 in 36. 1 in 22 in California, where I am. Like, we're not doing some things correctly. We're not doing some things the best, and we need to step back, and we need to look at what we're doing wonderfully, and we need to look at what we're not doing so well, and we need to find some middle ground. And so that is really what led me into the integrative space. And like you said, with like I never talked about vaccines. It was just too hot a topic. It's unfortunate, but it was just something that would get you shut down. And over the last few years, and certainly this year, I just decided that I feel like we need to talk about it. I think we're in a little different place now. I think that people are more open to having all kinds of discussions, and I'm not against vaccines. I think that we have to talk about it. We can't shy away from it. We have to see how these are related to our health in a positive and negative way. And that's what led me to write the book. And that thus far, it's been a very positive experience of the last couple months, but we'll see. It's controversial.
Yeah. And I saw a great Instagram post that you had something on there, like it was something to the effect of, just because a parent wants to learn how to, learn more about safer options for their children or how to do things the safest way doesn't mean they're anti-vax or something like that, right? It's just, there's so much stuff just going around like that. So really love the content that you're putting out.
Right, exactly. Like, wanting safety and wanting things to be safer, it's not anti that thing. Like, we're not against a thing, or someone's not against a thing because they want to have a discussion. They want to push for more studies. They want to push for more safety. They don't agree with all the research. Like you don't have to. That doesn't mean you're against the thing, but it's not that you're a bad parent because you care about safety. And it's like this weird world that we've moved into where like conversations shut down. Any questions that you have put you in that like crazy person camp, tinfoil hat conspiracy theory person. And I think that COVID just opened that up a little bit and really did shine a light on the fact that maybe not everything that we're told is always exactly correct, and people got more and more frustrated, and the pushback has been real. I mean, people are more frustrated than ever, and the very hesitancy that medicine's trying to prevent, they're actually creating, and we're having higher rates of exemptions and higher rates of unvaccinated children and everything that's the opposite of what is wanted, because no one's willing to have the conversation. You can't just tell people to do something, just do it because I say so. Like, you have to have the conversation.
Right, exactly. And yeah, exactly. I'm not anti-vax by any means, but I am curious when I see, like something I saw a week ago or so, which I'll probably butcher. You probably have more accurate stats on it, but it was like it showed the vaccine schedule from like 1980 versus the vaccine schedule today, and it was like, okay, we have whatever it is, 5x more or however many more multiples of vaccines that we're taking now, and then during this same time period, autism rates have also skyrocketed. So I don't know if there's a correlation there, but I'm sure interested. I sure would like to know more. I'm curious.
Right, exactly. And how does that make you a crazy conspiracy theorist to have to say that, right? It's like right. Yes, the vaccines have increased a lot, and yes, the autism rates have increased a lot. It doesn't mean they're connected or correlated, but you sure hear a lot of parents say, my kid got vaccinated and something changed right after. And so that is not science. That's anecdote. But science is built on anecdote. Science is built on listening to people, listening to families, listening to doctors, setting up hypotheses, and then testing those hypotheses. And if you are not allowed to have that conversation, then you really don't ever get to a better place. And it's not about stopping all vaccines, but maybe there's some ingredient in there that exacerbates or causes asthma. Maybe there's some ingredient in there, or whatever, right? Whatever. It doesn't have to be a vaccine, but it could be in a medication. And if we can't ask the questions, if we start seeing some correlations or some anecdotes of I did this and then this happened, then how are we ever going to get to a better place? And if we can figure that, we can make them better. It's not like that is crazy. We've done that before. We had the original DTP vaccine that was causing all sorts of neurologic concerns, and so they took it off the market and made DTAP, the new diphtheria tetanus pertussis vaccine. They had rotavirus, which was causing intussusception, blockages in the intestines. They took it off the market, made a newer version. So it's not like there isn't a precedent that vaccines couldn't ever cause a problem. Of course they could, right? I mean, it's ridiculous. Anything could. Tylenol could, water could. So shaming parents or not letting them ask the questions, especially in the setting that we are today, where there's more information available and people are talking about all these things, medicine has missed the PR boat, and they're missing the reality that you got to have these conversations, and you have to talk about risk versus benefits instead of what happened during the pandemic, which I think was maybe the biggest mistake in the last, 30, 40 years of just repeating safe and effective over and over and over again for something that you couldn't say that for. You can't say something is safe when you haven't studied it for 10 years when it's new. You could say the benefits seem to outweigh the risks that we know in the short term. That's what the research shows. But you can't say that it's safe categorically when it hasn't been around for 10 years. You could grow a third arm 5 years from now. Like, how do you know? You don't know that. But when you're just saying something over and over again, just like a propaganda, then you start losing people who are like, wait a minute, you told me this, and now I see that's not true. Oh, and you told me natural immunity doesn't count, and if I get sick, but that counted for every other thing in the past, and so why does that not count? Or all these things that were said that were very clearly not known at the time, and I think a lot of people just lost the last bit of trust they had in modern medicine, and instead of saying, well, we don't have to know everything during a pandemic. You don't have to know everything, but if you make something available, if you create a new vaccine, let's say, you make it available for those that want it, and that's fine. But when you start forcing people to do things, that's where you get pushback. And I think that's why we had so much pushback.
Yeah, yeah, and especially with the kids, right? For one thing, during the pandemic, first of all, I have two daughters, right? And so at the time, they were probably around, 9 years old, or 8, 9 years old, something like that. They were healthy. They're not overweight. We all had COVID, in the house, in the family. So we had, a natural immunity. And so, there was a lot of pressure. There were other kids. There was hey, my friends are getting vaccinated, conversations like that. And it's like, and so, again, I made the decision with my children just based on the information and based on the fact that our whole family already had it and had what I believe, a natural immunity, which I also read some studies showing that the natural immunity actually is more protective than the vaccine, based on studies that I read back then. So I made my own decision based on all the different information I had. But many people don't have that kind of information and study it really, and they just go by what the doctors say. And there are a lot of doctors. In fact, we had a pediatrician one time that we went to, and he was really adamant about the vaccines and was like getting an attitude about it when we were questioning about it. So yeah, I would love to kind of transition a little bit into that. Maybe a little background about the vaccine schedule and maybe some do's and don'ts or some of the common confusions that maybe we can unpack for people here.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, so yeah, the vaccine schedule, of course, has increased very significantly. I think most people are aware of that at this point. I mean, when you're going back into like the 40s, 50s, 60s, there were just a few vaccines. You're talking about smallpox vaccine until we took away the smallpox vaccine because we didn't need it anymore. There were the original DTP vaccines, so diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, and then the polio vaccine came in the 50s. And then after that, you had measles, MMR, that came in a few years later, I think like the 70s. So that's really all there was back then. You may be getting a few doses of some of them, but there weren't a ton. You might have been getting 3, 5, maybe 8 in that kind of range. And now, depending on if you're getting COVID vaccines every year, if you're getting flu vaccines every year, there are many, many, many more. If you're looking at just the antigens, so like just diphtheria, like there's like 100 antigens. You may be getting 30, 40 pokes over that time in the first decade or 2 decades if you're getting all of the vaccines. So it's a lot more, and that of course causes reasonable concern. I mean, on the flip side, medicine would say, well, great, we have protection against more diseases, and that's true. But when you're a parent, I think you looking at giving your kid 4 vaccines in one day. You're giving them vaccines at 2 months. Well, first when they're born, then at 2 months, then at 4 months, then at 6 months, then at a year, then at 15 months. And there's a bunch of them each time you're coming in. A reasonable parent would ask the question, well, how much is too much? When is it too many? Could that be a problem? Could some of these things that we're seeing be related? I think that is a reasonable question, because when you read some of the mainstream information, it's like, no, there's no such thing. There isn't ever too much. Your body can handle all these antigens, and you eat a piece of apple and there are all sorts of things on there, and it just really doesn't take into account the nuances of the fact that this is a synthetic product that we're injecting, not eating. And there are also all sorts of chemicals in any vaccine, right? There's a lot of not just the antigen, there are adjuvants and stabilizers and all sorts of things in there. So it doesn't take into account the whole picture. And just to dismiss it, I think is really, again, a bad move on medicine's part, because it doesn't take into account what people are actually worried about. And because people are so worried, they're just saying, I'm not going to do it. I'm not doing anything. I don't trust it.
Yeah, it does seem like everyone either went to one side or the other. Like either they're getting all of them or they're like, I'm not doing any of this, right? Where probably the best place is somewhere, some sort of middle ground there, or somewhere in the middle, right?
Usually is.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, in your book, right, Between a Shot and a Hard Place, when people read that book, what are some of the things that they would learn, and like some of the concepts or things you teach there?
I think what's unique about that book is the fact that any other book that you read in the vaccine literature, and I've read almost all of them at this point over the last few months to get ready for this project and go through it, they all seem to cherry pick. I think they come in with a preconceived notion. They're either extremely pro-vax or they're very anti-vax, or whatever terminology you want to use. And you look at any of the products in there, you look at hepatitis B or pneumococcus or whatever, and you get Either this vaccine is perfect and it saves your life, or this vaccine is terrible and you should never get it. And that is really difficult for parents. And even myself in the office, when I'm trying to talk to parents, I don't believe in telling people what to do. Not in my office, not online. I don't believe in telling people what to do in general for these types of things. I think it's a personal choice. I think you need to be given the information. You need to be informed consent, and then people can make whatever decision they want to make. I have patients in my office that do the regular schedule, that do a slow schedule, that some people don't vaccinate. Most people do something, but not all of them do. And I don't force people to do anything. And that is the way that I approach this book. I don't tell anybody what to do. In the book, I just present all the information so that people can make a decision that's right for them. And books don't really do that. And they try to lead you in a direction. And I think you need to have Paul Offit right beside RFK, and you need to see what they both say, so that way you can compare and contrast. And so it takes you through the history, it takes you through the diseases, it takes you through what are the risks in the past versus what are the risks currently. It goes through all the big questions and things that I get asked over and over again, and tries to synthesize that information. So we're talking about autism and what we know about that, and chronic disease, and asthma, and allergies, and sudden infant death syndrome. And like you ask about, too many vaccines, and what are too many vaccines, and what are the research say on that? So all of those kinds of topics, and I go through that, but really trying to go through the literature from I guess a bird's eye view, and then synthesize it into something that is digestible and more fun and a good read, but at the same time, very evidence based, and showing you like, you read a Paul Offit book, and he's great. I mean, he has great information if you are very pro-vaccine in the CDC, but they'll say something like, there's no research on this. And then you just turn to another book and there's tons of research on it. So you can't just say that things are perfectly safe or have never been studied. They exist. It's just cherry picked. And I think that's important for a parent to see, because my goal, if there was a goal with the book, is to bring the dialogue out from the shadows and have people start talking about it. The goal is to say, like, hey, there's so much information. Look at these contradicting points. Like, we need to talk about this. We need to study it, not to tell you what to do, what's right or wrong, but like, let's see what's actually out there so we can begin a dialogue, because far too many families, the dad and the mom can't agree, or the grandparent doesn't agree. And like, we need to start having conversations, and it can't be taboo anymore.
Yes. 100%. I love that. Absolutely love that. And I want to talk about allergies as well. That's a huge thing that, I don't remember having when I was a kid, that now is like so common that you have to be so careful with everything. So I definitely want to get your opinions on it. I like how in the book you're presenting all the information and then letting people make their own decisions. But I do also want to see if I can, push a little bit to get your actually personal opinions and viewpoints on certain things. Not that you're pressuring someone to act that way or, anything like that. Just curious, like on your own, like maybe with regards to autism, like what is based on all the research and literature and everything you've read, what is your opinion on why our autism rates are so much higher than they were previously?
I mean, the answer to autism, the honest answer is we don't know. We really don't know what's going on. With the autism and vaccines and the research that I did, the one thing that's very apparent that's really shocking is modern medicine continues to say the science is settled. We have all this robust data. We know for sure they don't cause them. And that is so clearly not true when you look at the research. I mean, we definitely don't know that vaccines do or do not cause autism. We don't have that kind of research to be able to make that statement. You definitely can't say that vaccines cause autism, because you have to study it. You'd have to see what you have to do prospective research. You'd have to do bigger trials. We don't have that. The research talks about MMR and thimerosal. Thimerosal is the mercury component that they've taken out of vaccines. So most of those studies are not even super relevant anymore anyways. And then the rest of the studies pretty much are on MMR. And that's just one vaccine. And you're looking at kids with MMR versus not MMR in the setting of getting their other vaccines. So that doesn't tell you anything about all the vaccines. There are many vaccines that you get before MMR, like whooping cough and polio and pneumococcus and rotavirus and all these other things. So how can you say that based on that vaccines don't cause autism? You have some confidence with the research that MMR on its own doesn't cause autism. We don't have the best research, but we have pretty good research on it. So that's the one thing that we do actually have. but really nothing on the rest of it. So we don't know what causes autism. I mean, there is a lot of other research out there with a lot of theories. We know that it's related to genetics to some degree. We know that it's related to older age of the parents, so especially older men have a higher risk. We know that it's related to chemicals and pollutants. So there are some things that we have a general sense of, but we certainly don't know what causes autism. And probably, I mean, my opinion, it's many things. I think it's many things. I don't think autism is one thing. I think for some people, it's a genetic condition. I think for other people, it's some sort of prenatal insult. For other people, it's an environmental toxin. Could vaccines be related to it? Maybe for some people, it pushes them over the edge. Maybe it's the thing that helps us to notice it because it causes an inflammatory reaction. Maybe it was going to happen anyway, so it has nothing to do with the vaccines, but maybe we just notice it around the time when you're getting vaccines, or maybe that kind of pushes you in a little faster than it would have happened otherwise. I don't know. I mean, we just don't know. But that is a travesty that we don't know. And that's, I believe, where the families and the parents that talk about this, and, if you hear RFK talk about it, or other people, like, that is a lot of what they're saying, is that we just, like, we need more research and data because it's not conclusive. It's not, the science is not settled. And that is very, very clear. I go through that in a lot of detail because that is the most controversial thing, for sure, I would say, in the book. And even though the whole topic is controversial, but that is very controversial. But I did not go in to say that. I thought there was more research. I really did. I mean, we're just told that there it is. I just assumed there was this robust research and I was going to show it, but it doesn't actually exist. And I'm very confident of that at this point because I went through the literature. I have a good background in literature and research. I read the books that are extremely pro-vax that talk about autism, like Peter Hotez's book and Paul Offit's book, and they don't have any other research. So I'm sure if it existed, it would be everywhere. It'd be on front page news of the New York Times. So I don't think it exists. I just think that we're using words in a certain way. Like, we're saying that vaccines don't cause autism because we don't have anything that proves that it does, which is very different. You're just saying, like, oh, vaccines don't cause autism because there's no research to show that it does. But you have to have that research to show that it does, if it does.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's probably a lot of companies that have a vested interest in that research not coming to market as well, unfortunately. But yeah, so let me ask you, let's kind of pretend, because this actually would be a realistic situation. So someone like myself, let's say I came to you and I would say, hey, I have a lot of concern about these vaccines. I don't just trust to put in my body whatever the government tells me to put in my body. I have a lot of questions. I'm a little concerned. I don't think I want to do the full schedule. How, what's an in between? What's a common in between thing? And then also, I wanted to ask you about, there are certain things that you can actually take as well, right? Aren't there sort of like, there are certain, maybe supplements, things that can bind to these, some of the heavy metals or toxins potentially in the vaccines. Maybe if you take something for a few days leading up to it or after it, maybe that could help diminish any potential side effects of these vaccines. Do you advise patients on anything like that? Any kind of protocol like that you recommend at all?
Okay, so there's a couple questions there. Great questions. So let's start with the kind of somebody coming into the office. So for vaccines in general, the only thing that is recommended technically, and the only thing a doctor can recommend, is the CDC schedule, because that is what has been studied and that is what is approved and researched. And I would say that as a physician, it would be, I have to be humble when I talk about this stuff and say, like, regardless of what I think or what other people think, there are many, many smart people that have worked on this for a very long time. They've come up with the CDC schedule that they believe to be the safest and that they've researched to be the safest. And so that is the technical recommendation at this time, because that's based on the research that we do have. I think we need more research on a lot of other things to be able to answer questions that I have and that other people have. But until we have those things, I don't think you can tell people to do something different than that categorically without the evidence. Everything outside of that falls on personal choice. And if you, after doing your research or after your personal situation or your family situation, believe that you want to do something different, I think that's totally fine and reasonable. And that's up to you to decide. And then you would have to decide what you would want to do and what you would feel comfortable doing. We have lots of people in our office that go on a slower schedule, and I think that's what you were kind of alluding to. I put some different ones in the book, the things that I've seen, nothing that's specifically recommended, but different things that I've seen, because there, again, is no such thing as an alternate schedule, right? There is no slow schedule that's been studied to say like this is better than that. You should go 1 month versus 2 months. You should do 2 versus 3. None of that exists. There is no research except on the main schedule. And those are the kind of things that are, it's reasonable questions. Like if you go a little slower, does that decrease your risk of X, Y, and Z? I don't know. How do we know that unless we study it? So that's a good question. But we talk about in the office weighing the risks and the benefits, and I try to go through that as well. Like, okay, well, what are you more likely to contract? What's more deadly? What age are you? What's your family history? What's your risk? Are you going to daycare? Are you traveling? I mean, these are all things that people should take into account when they're making these decisions. But you don't have a crystal ball. You never know who's going to get whatever disease. And so even though we haven't had a case of polio in decades, you could be the first kid to get polio. So if you don't get the vaccine, that's your risk. You're deciding whether you want to take that risk or not. For hepatitis B, a lot of people decide not to take that vaccine when their baby is first born. It's recommended for everybody, but if you've tested negative and no one in your family has hepatitis B, there's a very low risk you're going to give that to your baby, but it's still possible I could get it. So I can't tell you that it's not going to happen, but you weighing your risks, and it's quite different a story than if you tell me you have hepatitis B, right? Then your baby has a much different risk than someone who doesn't. So I think those are the kind of things that people need to take into account when they're making those decisions, and then come with whatever they're comfortable. Are you comfortable with one at a time? When are you comfortable starting? Are you comfortable coming into the office more to get them done? Like those are the things that are, you have to weigh for yourself. And those are the discussions that we would have in the office. Now, as for the last question about supplements, you can, we have them in the office. Again, there's no studies or research on this at all that I'm aware of. So you're doing it more out of common sense. Like you're supporting your body's detoxification, which makes logical sense to me. So there's no probably downside to doing that and supporting pooping, peeing, and sweating. That's how we get things out, right? And so if you're giving some magnesium, it's helping you go to the bathroom. If you're drinking a lot of fluids, that's a good thing. If you're moving a little bit more, that's a good thing. You can take like chlorella is very popular.
Yeah, I was thinking like chlorella and parsley, cilantro or whatever, and chlorella, things like that, right?
Sure. So, and those are all things that are, they're supported by research that they help with detoxification, that they're supportive of your body. So, it's not unlikely that having chlorella or cilantro is going to be bad for you. So, it might not do anything, but I don't see any problem with people doing that if they want to. It's just not studied. But again, it's ridiculous. Like, why would we not study that? Why would we not study, okay, we're saying we want to give everybody vaccines. Okay, how do we make them the safest possible? Are there some supplements we could give along with it? Maybe there are some things we can give to decrease the side effects, the short-term side effects. Oh, the kids are crying, it hurts. Like maybe there's something we can do that can decrease pain. I don't know, whatever. Like there are a lot of supplements out there. So you want to get people to vaccinate, maybe you can come up with a plan of 5 other supplements that actually are studied to effectively decrease your risk of X, Y, and Z. Like those are basic questions we could do, and we're giving kids 30, 40 vaccines. Like, why are we not trying to make it better for them?
Right, exactly. So if I come to you and I'm like, hey, I don't want to get all the vaccines. What are the most important ones? And I know this is a conversation that should be done in private in the doctor's office, right? Based on the situation. But I'm just trying to, for the people listening right now who are probably wondering, like, are there any vaccines that, he feels are probably okay based on his literature versus, if you had to, if I said I'm only doing half of them, are there any ones that you would surely leave off the list and surely leave on the list at all?
Well, I would go, so for that kind of question, the way that I would answer it is by looking at the risks from the diseases, right? I think that's the best way to go about it, because everything else, all the vaccines, if they're on the schedule, they're theoretically proven to be safe and effective, right? We've heard that many, many times. So they don't have the research to show that they're not effective, or they don't have the research to show that they're not safe. So you won't find that. You might find some studies that call it into question, and I try to elucidate and show those studies. But when you're talking about the diseases, the clear winner overall would be measles, right? I think measles is extremely contagious and can be quite serious. It's not that you should be terrified if your kid gets it, because most kids do fine. Most times it's a cold, but it's extremely contagious. Like basically, if you walk in a room and people are unvaccinated, then almost everyone's going to get it from that. Like 9 out of 10 people, if not 10 out of 10 people, it's that contagious. So you do see when there are outbreaks, kids die. I mean, you definitely do. And measles is always kind of coming and going, and there are always outbreaks of it because it's so contagious. So that one, I would say, of all them, is probably the most concerning of the vaccine preventable diseases. You would have RSV, which again, it's a new vaccine, but RSV definitely kills kids and definitely puts kids in the hospital. You see it all the time when you're a physician. Most kids get RSV. Basically, every kid gets it before they're 2. So do most kids end up in the hospital? No, most kids get a cold.
What is
But if you
RSV? I don't think, what does that even stand for, RSV?
respiratory syncytial virus, so it's a pretty
Okay.
common. We wouldn't have heard of it until like 5 years ago. You hear about it in the hospital if you work in the ICU, but you
Right.
don't really know about it maybe until the last year or two when we talked about viruses more. But it's a common cold. It's one of the colds that
Yeah.
you get. But if you get it really severe, it can get into your lungs, cause breathing issues, especially for babies. So that's real. That's certainly around. Haemophilus influenza, something that can cause meningitis, was a much bigger concern 20 years ago. Not as big a concern now, but the vaccine has worked quite well for that. That was a big deal a long time ago. Pneumococcus is the leading cause in the world of pneumonias, which of course can be pretty severe. So that's another one to think about. So those are, some of the bigger ones. I mean, the other vaccines in the young childhood, polio, right? I mean, obviously you don't want polio, but there hasn't been a polio case in a long time. So that's less of a risk at the moment. Hepatitis B, you get it mostly through birth if mom has it, or sexual contact, or blood, or IV drugs. So kids are very low risk for that, but just not zero. What else? So rotavirus is a diarrheal illness in kids. So again, very common, but not usually super severe here. If you're in a third world country, then it could be more severe if you're dehydrated, but usually not so much here. So not as big a concern, I would say. So that's the way that I weigh them personally. If I'm saying like, well, if I want to do this one versus not the other one, then I try to look at risk benefits.
That's great. Yeah, that's a great summary there. And then, I mean, I guess may as well address the elephant in the room about, the COVID vaccines and the flu shot. Seems I'm very confused by the whole situation. It was like everyone, it was every year, certain time of year, be like, everyone get a flu shot. Then COVID happened. And then it was like, you just need a COVID shot. You don't need a flu shot anymore. Now maybe, it's like, so there's just a lot of really weird kind of confusing stuff around there. But I guess as it comes to kids in general, I know it's obviously case by case, but in general with kids, are you recommending a yearly flu shot if they're healthy and don't have any kind of pre-existing conditions or anything like that?
So COVID shot and flu shot are still both recommended on the schedule to get. My patients are, I would say that's one of the ones that is a much higher rate of people not doing it. The flu shot is very spotty, per year. It's a guess every year as to what strains are going to be going around, and many years they don't guess very well, so it's not super effective. It's generally, you look at the research and the reviews show that it's effective. It's not very, very effective, but it does decrease your risk of hospitalization and death by most studies. So it's not a huge increase, but it does do that. I think parents just question oftentimes, like, do I want to get a vaccine every year? Do I want to get one more vaccine every year? Does it affect other things? I'm going to have a reaction from the flu shot. Most times when you get a vaccine, you have a little bit of a reaction to it. So do I want to take the risk of the increased risk from the flu, or do I want to take the risk from the vaccine? Will it affect other diseases? Am I going to be more likely to get sick from some other virus? There are some studies that show that. There are some studies that show that it increases your risk to get non-flu respiratory viruses, and some studies don't show that. So that research is not clear, but those are the reasons why some people decide not to do it. And it's still not required almost anywhere in terms of the vaccine schedule. It's just recommended. The COVID shot, that's a much bigger question mark, I think, because you still have the recommendation in America to give it to little kids 6 months and up. But if you look at what people are doing, like, nobody's getting it. It's like very, very, very low percentage. It's just a few percent of people. Even healthcare providers, it's like 10%, 15% are getting it now. Like, it's a very, very, very low percentage of people getting boosters. So there's certainly a disconnect between the recommendations and how valuable people think it is. at this time. And there's a very big disagreement, I guess, in the world of whether, because most countries don't require it anymore, certainly not for young kids. They recommend it for high risk groups, or if you want to get it, you can get it. But we still have it on our regular schedule. So I don't know. I mean, almost everybody's had it at this point, and most people that do get it, especially kids, it is quite mild. So yeah, it's still recommended technically, but I think that the population, at least as of right now, has kind of spoken that they're not interested in getting it every year. So we'll see if that changes, or if coronavirus changes, or where that goes.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and what are, I mean, there was some, again, these studies might have been biased that I saw, but you see this huge rise in myocarditis, or children having issues ever since the pandemic, right? When so many children were vaccinated. Anything that you've seen there that's concerning to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's concerning that we live in a twilight zone where there are two different stories going on at the same time, and it's hard to
Right.
know what to believe. I mean, you read the mainstream stuff, and it's like the COVID vaccine saved millions of lives and trillions of dollars, and then you look at the website one over, and it says the COVID vaccine is the worst thing ever, and it's killed all sorts of people, and has this huge rate of risks and concerns, and it's really hard to know what to believe, because a lot of times they are both somewhat credible, and both sides are biased. So it's very hard to know what to believe right now, especially with the COVID vaccine. Everything that you said is true. I mean, all those things have happened. There is a risk of myocarditis, no question about that. There is a much higher reported rate of concerns around it, side effects, deaths, everything. But those are self-reported, and they're not necessarily from the vaccine. So we're much more aware of the COVID vaccine and of reporting, and so things have been. Anything that happens around when you get a vaccine, people are reporting it. But just because you got a heart attack today and got a vaccine this morning doesn't mean it's from the vaccine. So we have a lot more reporting, so therefore a lot more issues that have been reported. But whether they're related or not, I don't know. It's just that we have pulled things off the market in the past for much smaller signals than we have from the COVID vaccine, and I think that is the point that a lot of concerned individuals are making. Like we have, if you have thousands and thousands of deaths reported, okay, maybe they're not all true, but if like 1% is still true, then that's still a lot, and that's still a lot more than we pulled off things in the market in the past. So it does make it really difficult as a average consumer to be like, what is true, what is not. But I could just say from what I've seen that I think a lot of people are not convinced they should keep taking them.
Right. Right. Yeah, definitely have seen that. And yeah, I mean, look, we know when the pandemic happened, obviously older people with pre-existing conditions, things like that. But I never saw anything alarming for kids especially kids who were, somewhat healthy, not really overweight, don't have pre-existing conditions. I never saw any major risk factor there. So, and I don't know, I'm kind of I'm curious, like how you see things like this, but I'm really of the approach as much as possible of like naturally your immune system naturally overcoming things and strengthening based on that, right? It's like, we had a recent podcast episode where we were discussing how, some people, every time they just get a little cold, they go get a Z-Pack or some antibiotics or something, right? And rather than just, okay, maybe you're sicker for 2 more extra days, but now you're allowing your body to, naturally recover from it and, in theory, develop a stronger immune response versus, destroying your gut microbiome potentially with antibiotics. What is your opinion on kind of like, your body's natural ability to strengthen its immune system and response on its own?
Yeah, I think that our letting our body fight something off naturally in the long run in general is the best thing, right? I think that your body is amazing, and if we mount a robust response to an infection, then we have the best immunity that we're going to get. That's always been true. That's not pseudoscience. Like, of course, if you fight off an infection, then you have antibodies to all the different parts of the infection. Your body has mounted a full response, as opposed to a vaccine, which might be just a small part of it, or it's a synthetic version, or whatever it is. But you have to not die, right, or get really sick. So there's a balance there, and the theoretical point of a vaccine, the initial point when it was back with smallpox, was you have this thing that kills a lot of people. Let's give somebody something that's less likely to kill you, less likely to have severe side effects. Let's give you something that improves your chances at a long life. And maybe you're not going to get quite as good a antibody response from smallpox, but you most likely won't die. So that was the initial point of vaccines. I think we've gotten off track a little bit with vaccines to the point where it's like anything we can make a vaccine for, anything that we see all the time, we should get a vaccine for that. We should keep making more vaccines. And just because we can make a vaccine for something doesn't mean we should. And I think that's the conversation that we are going to have in the future of the plus and the minuses, the risks and the benefits, because at some point there's too much of a good thing. And at some point there are just too many shots, and you can get 4, 5, 6 shots on a day now. And is that increasing your risk at having side effects? Is it increasing your risk at having complications? Like, these are real questions that we should be having, because yes, doing things naturally is going to be better in general, but a pneumonia, I make this like a pneumonia is natural, but like, do you want to die? Like, antibiotics are not natural, but they save your life, right? So it's not always that natural is better. We have to use the amazing things that we have in modern medicine in balance. And vaccines are a tool. They're not like a god or an idol. They're a thing that we have, and we have to use them as a tool and not something that's like, hey, every kid needs all of these all the time. You're forced to do it. Oh, there's a new thing that's out there. Okay, everybody get it. Like, that we can't have. We have to have choice, and make as many as you want. Let people choose if they want to get them or not. And I think if we do that, then we're going to be in a better place. I just don't think we should force anybody to. I don't have a problem with the COVID vaccines, like having them come out quickly. I don't have a problem with that in the middle of a pandemic. I have a problem with forcing people to take them. That's what I have an issue with.
And making people lose their jobs and close, and all sorts of things, right? Like, how many people lost their job because they just didn't want to inject themselves with a foreign substance that they didn't have enough information on? I mean, yeah, that's crazy. So yeah, really, really appreciate the way you're presenting and helping people with this. I did want to ask you about allergies real quick as well. So any insights, right? This whole, like, are there things people can do? Should people start giving their child, small doses of peanut butter from a very young age? Is it anything around there, or like any insights as to what has? Obviously, there's so many different reasons and probably so much things to do with processed foods, artificial dyes, who knows what else, glyphosate. It could be so many things, right? But
yeah, I mean, it's another great question that's a medical mystery. Like, we don't understand allergies fully yet. We don't know why people get them. We don't know why some people get them and others don't. We don't know why they've skyrocketed, but they certainly have. They've doubled and tripled in their rates in the last few decades. So there's no question that some things that we're doing are a problem. We do know from the research that giving the allergenic foods earlier, within reason, is actually a good thing. We used to, when we were growing up, give it later, but the actual studies show that you shouldn't wait till they're 1 or 2 or 3. You should give it to them when they're 6, 7, 8 months, at least be exposed to it, which makes logical sense to me, because if you're assuming that your immune system is making a memory, then you're exposing it to something so it knows that it's not a bad thing or a weird thing, instead of just showing it later and thinking it's foreign. So that makes sense to me. Whether vaccines are related to that, that's still up in the air. The mainstream research says no. There are some studies that show that it's a little bit maybe related in some of those studies. So I don't know. It's still, the mainstream says no. But I would say, if I was to guess at why we have a lot of these allergy increases, it's because of the chemicals and the toxins that we're exposed to, all of them. The glyphosate, the food, the preservatives, the mucking up of our gut. And it makes sense. If you destroy the inside of your gut, then why would your body react normally to food, right? Or whatever. It's like you're destroying what it's supposed to do. So it has weird reactions. It has hyper reactions. It reacts in the way that it's not supposed to. And maybe vaccines are related to that, maybe not. But I think chemicals and toxins are.
Yeah. That's good insight. Yeah. So giving small amounts. Because kids are so young; they're almost like, a lot of them are breastfeeding, for the first year or at least several months. Many people are, in which case, like, what goes into their gut microbiome is not even really their choice, right? I guess that in that case it would be based on the parent.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's another point too, is a lot of people don't breastfeed anymore. A lot of people use formula synthetic, and if you need it, it's great that we have it. But I'm sure that also is related to. I mean, actually, the research does show for sure, like, you have an increased risk of allergies and asthma and eczema and most conditions if you use formula versus breast milk. It's just not as natural, and so your body has to deal with those chemicals and preservatives. That's just the reality of it if you're using it. So I do think that's related as well, and that's a part of why we're seeing some increase, because we're giving kids something that is not natural per se, and they're drinking it for 6 months straight as the only food, basically.
Wow.
So I wouldn't
Yeah.
see how that wouldn't mess up a small percentage of kids and their gut if it's not aligned with what it's supposed to be for their gut.
Especially since, I mean, I thought I heard something that it was like pretty much all formula made in the US has seed oils in it.
It does, yeah, it
You
does.
know,
Yeah. So it's
it's like
there.
a rule. It's like a weird rule somehow that like you have to
Well,
have
it's
seed
for the
oil in the formula.
omegas and the fats, and there isn't anything
Uh,
else that really covers all that. So the people are working on it, but it's not really there's not really a good viable option to cover all the nutrients that you need. That's what's so hard about formula is, you look at the ingredients, you're like, why is all this crap in here, right? And then, but it's not. It's like it's a very delicate balance. They have to have what they need to have to make sure you're getting all the nutrients that you need. And so there are only certain things that can get those nutrients that can replace breast milk. Because I've seen very well-meaning parents try to make their own formula, and then they miss something. They miss zinc, or they miss some ingredient, and then the kid gets really sick because they get deficient because it's all they're drinking for 6 months.
yeah, yeah. This has been absolutely great. Any other kind of last pieces of general advice, maybe for people who want to make sure they raise healthy, happy kids that have that are again, just like we know there's so much connected, right, with brain health and how they feel and how they act and things like that. Any other pieces of kind of overall general advice you could give?
Yeah, I would say it's time that everyone realizes that healthcare, medicine, it doesn't necessarily think about your family. I mean, you want to find a doctor that hopefully you can partner with. If you don't feel comfortable with your practitioner, you're in charge, you can find someone that does. So you really, make sure you interview doctors. If you're finding a new one, make sure you find one that you trust and respect and can have conversations with. But at the end of the day, it is up to us, a lot of it. I mean, your doctor's there to support you, but they're not there shopping with you. They're not there going for a walk with you, all those things. So I think that we need to just remember that we're not at the healthiest place right now, and we can make a big difference. Making those small choices really does add up. And so just remember that we do have a lot of power, and put health into your decision making when you're making choices.
Absolutely. Absolutely love that. Dr. Gator, this has been incredible. Where can people, and by the way, do you do telemedicine in your practice at all? If people are on the other side of the country, can they still work with you?
I do telemedicine, but you have to be a patient to do that. I do vaccine coaching, so if people want to do like a session one-on-one, then I can do that. But as a doctor, you have to only for your patients. But I can talk to people, so yeah, you can reach out if you did want to do a one-on-one session. So the best place to find me would be so you can go to get the book Between a Shot and a Hard Place, either on Amazon or theshotbook.com, and you can go from there. You can also book the one-on-one from that website, or on Instagram, Dr. Joel Gator, or X, same thing, Dr. Joel Gator.
Amazing. Yeah. And you've got a great following. You're putting out some great stuff. Really appreciate the approach that you're taking. I really wish all doctors were like you, and educating and giving people options and actually listening to what they want or don't want, rather than just imposing their will and their opinions on others. So it's really a breath of fresh air, and really appreciate all that you're doing in this world. So yeah, please continue to do it. Highly recommend people work with you and get your book if they're interested, especially if they have a kid, in this age range. And I hope we can do this again sometime. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, can you please leave us a rating or review and subscribe? I've realized that while we have actually increased our downloads a lot, we're actually getting a lot of downloads, which I'm really happy about. We actually have very few ratings. And I realized that I've never asked people really to rate much. So I'm asking you now if you could please rate and review and subscribe. And if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to anyone that you think will get value out of this. Also, if you haven't checked out our line of products at buypeakperformance.com, you get 20% off your first order. That's www.buypeakperformance.com. peakperformance.com. We have some incredible products, including our organic high-altitude coffee. If you don't know this, coffee is one of the most heavily sprayed with pesticides out of any crop. So it's really important that you drink organic coffee. We've gone above and beyond to source what we believe is the highest quality and healthiest organic coffee in the world. We're also famous for our organic green superfood powder. You can get 20% off of that as well at buypeakperformance.com. We also have an organic vegan and paleo plant protein. See, most of the vegan proteins out there are using brown rice protein, which is really not a good source of protein, and it's also a grain. And if you're paleo, you know that grains tend to cause inflammation in some cases for some people. And so we wanted to make one that was paleo friendly and vegan and organic. We made an amazing amino acid profile, so it's really one of the best plant proteins for muscle building. So you can check out Peak Performance Organic Plant Protein. You can find that on our website. Of course, all our products are on Amazon as well. So thanks again. And again, please, if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to someone who you feel can get value out of it. And please leave us a rating, review, and subscribe. Thank you.